The day started like any other, but little did I know it would become a turning point in our lives. My name is Samuel Parker, and I'm a federal judge. However, on that fateful day, I was simply a father fighting for his son's rights and dignity. It had been a year since the accident that took my son Alex's sight. At 16, he was just learning to navigate the world anew with his guide dog Max, a gentle golden retriever who had become Alex's eyes, his confidence, and his lifeline to independence. As a widowed father, I had sought a peaceful community where we could rebuild our shattered lives. Willow Creek Estates seemed perfect, with its tree-lined streets and excellent schools. We had only been in our new home for 2 weeks when Alex finally felt confident enough to venture into the neighborhood with Max. Watching them from the porch, my son's hand resting on his guide dog's harness, his steps becoming more assured, I thought we had finally found healing. Max moved with grace and purpose, guiding Alex around obstacles and stopping at curbs. The bond between them was palpable, a testament to the months of rigorous training they had undergone together. Little did I know that this simple act of independence would trigger a campaign of cruelty that would test not only my patience as a father, but the very limits of my judicial restraint. 3 days after Max's first neighborhood walk, a letter arrived, slipped under our door like some kind of covert threat. Violation, unauthorized animal on premises, $750 fine, immediate removal required. The paper trembled in my hands, not from fear, but from a growing rage I hadn't felt since presiding over civil rights violations in my courtroom. I immediately called an emergency meeting with the HOA board, Max's service animal certification and ADA documentation in hand. Their president, Victoria Hartley, barely glanced at the papers before sliding them back across the table with manicured fingernails. "Your situation doesn't exempt you from our covenant," she said, her eyes narrowing at Alex, who sat quietly beside me, Max perfectly still at his feet. "Some residents find certain disabilities unsettling, the visibility of it all," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I explained calmly, years of judicial composure keeping my voice level, that the Americans with Disabilities Act specifically protects service animals. Federal law supersedes HOA regulations. Victoria exchanged glances with her board members. "We've had other residents attempt to claim special status before, Mr. Parker. This is an exclusive community. Rules maintain our standards." "That's Judge Parker," corrected one of the board members quietly, recognition dawning on his face. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. "Your profession doesn't grant exemptions here. This isn't your courtroom," she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Besides, there are plenty of appropriate communities for people with special needs. Perhaps Willow Creek isn't the right fit for your situation?" As we left, Alex whispered, "Dad, why do they hate Max so much?" I couldn't tell him the truth, that Max wasn't the problem. In Victoria's eyes, it was Alex's disability that threatened her perfect community. I placed my hand on his shoulder, making a silent promise that I wouldn't let their prejudice drive us from our home. What followed was a calculated campaign of intimidation that would have impressed even the most seasoned prosecutors I'd worked alongside. Security cameras, coincidentally installed, faced our home. Neighbors suddenly documented our every move, smartphones raised whenever Alex and Max stepped outside. Anonymous calls to animal control claimed Max was aggressive toward children, all dismissed after inspectors found a perfectly trained service animal, but each visit left Alex more anxious, more reluctant to leave our home. Max, sensing Alex's distress, became even more attentive, pressing close to Alex's side and offering comforting nuzzles when he felt his young master's anxiety rising. When Alex attempted to join neighborhood teens at the community pool, Victoria personally intervened, loudly announcing that his special needs required parental supervision at all times. She made a show of escorting him out, explaining to onlookers that liability concerns necessitated such measures. I don't understand, Dad," Alex said that night, his voice breaking. "I've never done anything to these people. Max never barks or causes problems." Max, as if understanding, rested his head on Alex's lap, offering silent support. I documented everything meticulously, just as I would prepare evidence for a federal case: voice recordings, emails, photographs, witness statements from a few sympathetic neighbors brave enough to speak with us. A federal judge knows exactly what constitutes harassment and discrimination. But I said nothing about my profession. Yet strategic silence was my advantage. The HOA began issuing new emergency regulations targeting us specifically. All animals must be registered with DNA samples. Residents with special accommodations must submit monthly medical verification. Specially trained animals must wear muzzles in common areas. Each violation carried increasing fines, now totaling thousands. When I formally contested them, Victoria responded with a letter stating, "The board finds your constant complaints disruptive to community harmony. Further disputes may result in lien proceedings." One evening, I found Alex sitting alone in the dark, Max's head in his lap. "They want us gone because I'm blind, don't they?" he asked quietly. Max whined softly as if trying to reassure Alex that he wasn't alone. That night, I made 2 calls, one to my clerk to clear my docket for the coming storm, and another to a civil rights attorney colleague. Victoria Hartley had no idea what she had set in motion. Yesterday began like any ordinary Tuesday. Alex had a mobility training session after school, so I dropped him and Max off. Before heading to court, I was presiding over a complex interstate commerce case, the kind that requires complete focus. When my clerk rushed in during a brief recess, phone in hand, I heard, "Judge Parker, it's an emergency. Your son just called from your home number." Alex's voice trembled through the speaker. "Dad, they're here. Police and animal control. Victoria is saying Max attacked someone. They're trying to take him away. I don't know what to do." I could hear the commotion in the background, multiple voices, Max confused whining, and Victoria's shrill accusations cutting through it all. "Alex, stay calm," I instructed, my heart racing. "Put Max on his lead and show them his service vest and ID. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't let them take him without proper documentation." As I raced home, pieces of Victoria's plan became clear. She had orchestrated an emergency HOA vote regarding dangerous animals precisely when she knew I'd be in court. The community newsletter announced it with barely 24 hours' notice. A copy deliberately misdelivered to our neighbor's mailbox instead of ours. Then she made her checkmate move, calling in police with claims that Max had threatened a child during his morning walk. No witnesses, no evidence, just her word against a disabled teenager. By the time I turned onto our street, a small crowd had gathered. Officer Thompson stood beside his patrol vehicle, its rear door open. Max was already halfway loaded inside, his eyes wide with confusion and distress. A tearful Alex sat disoriented on our front lawn, reaching desperately into empty air, his white cane thrown carelessly aside. Victoria was telling the gathering neighbors, her voice pitched to Carrie, "The dog lunged at the Peterson boy. We've had concerns for months. Just because the child is blind doesn't mean we should risk community safety." Several neighbors nodded in agreement. Alex cried from the ground, "That's impossible. Max was on my left side the entire time. He never breaks position. He's trained." Max whined from the patrol car, straining against his leash, desperate to return to Alex's side. "See how emotional the boy gets?" Victoria interrupted. "This is exactly the kind of instability we're concerned about." I approached slowly, taking in every detail. 15 years on the federal bench had taught me the importance of timing. I needed to see exactly how far they would go before I revealed my hand. "Officer," I said calmly, "may I ask what's happening here?" The officer, a man in his late 40s with a stiff posture, cleared his throat. "Sir, we've received reports of an aggressive animal. I'm just following protocol." Victoria stepped forward, a self-satisfied smirk playing at her lips. "Finally, we're addressing the situation. You were warned, Mr. Parker. Rules exist for everyone's protection." I looked at my son, still reaching blindly for his guide dog, his entire world being torn away by neighborhood prejudice disguised as policy. Something in me shifted irreversibly. Victoria's voice rang out, sharp and triumphant. "You should have followed the rules from the beginning." She pointed dramatically at Max, who sat perfectly behaved despite the chaos. "Special treatment leads to chaos. First dogs, then who knows what kind of people moving in next." The crowd murmured in agreement. Several neighbors nodded, smartphones recording the scene. Officer Thompson looked increasingly uncomfortable, but he continued the procedure, checking Max's tags and preparing paperwork for animal control. Victoria pressed on, fueling the moment. "Ooh. There's a process for requesting accommodations," she said, playing to the audience. "You can't just move in and expect everyone to change for you. This neighborhood has standards." Alex's silent tears as he reached blindly for his missing companion broke something fundamental inside me. I watched his fingers grasp empty air where Max should have been. His security, his independence, stripped away by small-minded cruelty masquerading as community standards. Mrs. Davidson, our elderly neighbor, finally spoke up. Victoria, this is going too far. The boy needs his dog. Stay out of this, Helen, Victoria snapped. Your property values are at stake too. Do you want to live next to— She caught herself, but the implication hung in the air. This wasn't about rules or property values. It was about who Victoria deemed acceptable in her perfect community. I took a measured step forward. Officer, I said, my voice calm but firm, before you continue, I'd like to understand the specific complaint that authorized the seizure of a service animal. The officer hesitated. Sir, I have a report of aggressive behavior toward a minor. When a service animal displays aggression— And what evidence supports this claim? I asked, my tone cool. Any witnesses besides the complainant? Any history of previous incidents? Any actual contact or injury? Officer Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Well, no physical contact was reported, but he bared his teeth. Mrs. Peterson, the supposed victim's mother, nudged her son forward. Tell the officer, Tommy. The child, no older than 6, looked up confused. The dog looked at me. Silence fell over the group. Alex's hands clenched into fists. His breathing became erratic, signs of an anxiety attack I had seen too often since his accident. From the patrol car, Max strained toward him, sensing his distress. 15 years of judicial restraint evaporated in an instant. Officer Thompson, I said, my voice deadly calm, I have some information that will significantly change how you proceed in the next 30 seconds. Victoria stepped between us. Don't try to intimidate him. The law is clear about dangerous animals. Yes, I replied, meeting her gaze directly. The law is absolutely clear, and you're about to learn exactly how clear it is. The crowd fell silent, sensing the shift in power. Someone whispered, "Who is this guy?" Victoria smirked. Just another resident who thinks rules don't apply to his family situation. That word, dripping with condescension, was the final catalyst. I removed my overcoat, revealing the suit I had worn to court that morning, and reached for my credentials. I approached Officer Thompson, maintaining the measured pace I use when delivering consequential rulings. The crowd parted instinctively, something in my demeanor commanding their attention. Officer, I'm Federal Judge Samuel Parker, Eastern District, I stated, presenting my credentials. That service animal is protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what's happening here constitutes criminal discrimination against a disabled minor. The crowd fell completely silent. Officer Thompson's eyes widened as he examined my identification. Furthermore, I continued, my voice carrying across the now hushed gathering, I've been recording and documenting this entire harassment campaign for the past 3 months. Today's events now constitute evidence in what will become a federal civil rights violation case. Victoria's face transformed from smug to horror as the implications dawned on her. You never said you were a judge, she stammered. And you never said you were targeting my son because of his disability, I replied. Yet here we are. I turned to the neighbors recording this incident. I encourage you to continue your documenting multiple federal violations, including conspiracy to violate civil rights, discrimination under the ADA, and harassment of a protected individual. Officer Thompson immediately stepped back from his vehicle. Judge Parker, I was informed this was an unlicensed aggressive animal. Had I known— I understand you were misled, I interrupted, but I'm curious why standard procedure for verifying service animal status wasn't followed before attempting removal. He paled visibly. Sir, I deeply apologize. This should never have happened. Max bolted from the patrol car directly to Alex, pressing against him as my son wrapped his arms around his guide dog, relief washing over his face. Max licked Alex's cheeks, whining softly as if to say, I'm here. I'm not leaving you. I turned back to Victoria. Victoria Hardley, I said, my tone judicial, you deliberately scheduled today's emergency HOA meeting during court hours. You falsified reports to animal control. You've engaged in systematic discrimination against a disabled minor. Each of these actions carries significant penalties under federal law. Victoria backed away, looking desperately at her neighbors for support, but found only shocked faces. This is absurd, she sputtered. We have HOA regulations that clearly state no private regulations supersede federal law, I interrupted, something you've been reminded of multiple times in writing. Suddenly, 3 neighbors stepped forward. The Johnsons, whose adopted children had been denied pool access, Mr. Rivera, whose mother's wheelchair ramp had been cited as a visual nuisance, and Mrs. Patel, whose religious holiday decorations had resulted in escalating fines. It wasn't just them, Mrs. Patel said quietly. She's been doing this to many of us. Victoria's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely as she realized the extent of her miscalculation. "This is my community," she hissed. "I've worked for years to maintain its standards." I took a step forward. "Your vendetta," I said evenly, "just triggered a federal investigation into this entire HOA. Everyone involved will be subpoenaed. I suggest you contact legal counsel immediately." Officer Thompson straightened, his training kicking in. "Sir, I'm releasing the service animal back to your son immediately." He secured the patrol car door. "I'll need to file a corrected report documenting the situation." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, her phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. Her board members, realizing their liability, were calling. The power Victoria had wielded so ruthlessly for years evaporated in an instant. As she retreated, muttering about lawyers and misunderstandings, I knelt beside Alex and Max. My son's arms were still wrapped tightly around his faithful companion, his face buried in Max's. "It's over, Alex," I said softly. "No one's taking Max away. You're safe." Alex lifted his head, tears still streaking his cheeks. "Dad, I was so scared. I thought I'd never see Max again." "I know, son," I replied, my own voice thick with emotion. "But Max wasn't going to let that happen. He fought for you just like you fought for him." Max, as if understanding, licked Alex's face and wagged his tail. The bond between them, forged through adversity and strengthened by unwavering loyalty, was a testament to the extraordinary connection between humans and their animal companions. As we stood to go inside, neighbors approached one by one, offering apologies and support. The community that Victoria had ruled through fear and division was already beginning to heal. Mrs. Davidson touched my arm gently. "Judge Parker, we're so sorry. We should have spoken up sooner." I nodded, acknowledging their regret. "It's not about blame now. It's about building a truly inclusive community where everyone feels welcome and valued." As we walked back to our house, Alex's hand confidently on Max's harness, I realized that this ordeal had not only exposed the darkness of prejudice, but it also revealed the light of human compassion and the unbreakable spirit of a boy and his dog. In the days that followed, our neighborhood transformed. The HOA was dissolved, replaced by a community council committed to fairness and inclusion. Alex and Max became local heroes, their story inspiring others to stand up against discrimination. Max, ever the faithful companion, seemed to walk with even more pride, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight as he guided Alex through their now welcoming neighborhood. Their journey had not only changed our lives, but had touched the hearts of an entire community, reminding us all of the power of love, loyalty, and the indomitable spirit of both humans and animals in the face of adversity. As I watched them from our porch, Alex laughing as Max playfully nuzzled his hand, I knew that we had found more than just a place to live. We had found a new beginning. This wasn't just about winning a battle against discrimination. It was about reclaiming our dignity, our peace, and our right to belong. Max had become more than a guide dog to Alex. He was his protector, his confidant, and his unwavering source of courage. In the days that followed, Alex began to thrive in ways I hadn't seen since the accident. He joined the local youth group, started attending community events, and even began teaching others about the importance of service animals and the rights of people with disabilities. Max was always by his side, a symbol of resilience and hope. Our neighbors, once silent bystanders, became active allies. Families who had previously been too afraid to speak out against Victoria's tyranny came forward with their own stories of mistreatment. Together, we worked to rebuild the sense of community that had been lost under her oppressive rule. The Johnsons' children played freely in the park without fear of judgment. Mrs. Patel's holiday lights twinkled proudly during Diwali. Mr. Rivera's mother finally enjoyed her wheelchair ramp without receiving petty citations. One evening, Alex stood in front of a crowd at a community event organized to celebrate inclusivity and diversity. With Max sitting proudly at his feet, Alex spoke with a confidence that brought tears to my eyes. "Max isn't just my guide dog," he said. "He's my best friend, my hero. He's taught me that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward if you have someone by your side who believes in you." The crowd erupted into applause, and Max wagged his tail happily, as if he understood the praise was for him. I couldn't have been prouder of my son or more grateful for the incredible animal who had given him back his independence and joy. As the event wound down and people began to disperse, Mrs. Davidson approached us with a warm smile. "Judge Parker," she said softly, You've not only changed this neighborhood, you've changed all of us. She knelt down to scratch Max behind the ears. And this brave boy here has reminded us what loyalty and love truly mean. I smiled, watching as Alex leaned down to hug Max once more. He's more than brave, I said quietly. He's extraordinary. Life didn't magically become perfect after that day. There were still challenges to face and battles to fight, but we faced them together, as a family and as part of a stronger community. Max continued to guide Alex through life's obstacles with unshakable devotion, proving time and again that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, even with 4 paws and a wagging tail. And as I stood there on that warm summer evening, watching my son walk confidently into the future with Max by his side, I realized something profound. Sometimes it takes an extraordinary challenge to reveal the extraordinary strength within us. And sometimes it takes an extraordinary dog like Max to remind us of what truly matters in life: love, loyalty, and never giving up on each other. We had found our home, not just in Willow Creek Estates, but in each other. And that was something no one could ever take away from us again.